Okay, let's start this deep dive with kind of a challenging question. How far would you really go? I mean, financially, legally, even psychologically.
Yeah.
How far would you push yourself to keep a promise to someone you lost?
Yeah, a vow, really. A vow to make sure their killer faces justice, even if it takes, what, years? Decades, even millions of dollars.
It sounds hypothetical, but it's not. That's the core of the story we're diving into today. It's about Satoru Takaba and the 1999 murder of his wife, Namiko, in Nagoya, Japan.
And this case is just, well, it's extraordinary. It spans 26 years. It's this incredible mix of just sheer human willpower, major legal shifts in Japan, and cutting-edge forensic science coming together.
Right. So our mission today, using the sources we have, these detailed investigative reports, plus transcripts from Japanese news outlets like AN News CH and TBS New WS Dig, is to unpack how one man's vow, this 26-year commitment, actually laid the groundwork for a shocking arrest just recently.
And the thing that hits you right away is the contradiction, isn't it? This case wasn't cracked by some new witness suddenly appearing or, a dramatic confession. It was solved because of physical evidence, specifically blood DNA, evidence that was preserved for over a quarter of a century.
And not preserved in some high-tech police lab freezer either.
Exactly. It survived because the victim's husband, Satoru, made the unbelievable decision to personally pay to keep the crime scene itself untouched for 26 years.
It's hard to even wrap your head around that. A personal financial investment in justice that literally changed everything for a cold case. We really have to start at the beginning, though, back in 1999. Okay, so the date is November 13th, 1999. We're in the Nishi ward of Nagoya. The victim, Namiko Takaba, 32 years old, a housewife. She was attacked, murdered in her own second-floor apartment, probably around midday.
And the scene itself, the reports describe extreme brutality, a real struggle. Namiko was attacked with a sharp weapon.
And her husband, Satoru, he confirmed later, none of their kitchen knives were missing.
Right, which means the killer brought the weapon with them. It points to premeditation. Namiko suffered multiple stab wounds, especially bad around the neck, fatal blood loss. But crucially, she had defensive wounds. She fought back hard.
And then there's the detail that it makes it almost unbearable. Their child was there.
Yeah. Namiko's 2-year-old son, Kohei, he was in the apartment when it happened. When the landlord found Namiko's body, which was around 2:00 p.m., so hours later, the little boy was found unharmed, just sitting near his mother.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. Sources say he was sitting there silently, just an image that must have haunted everyone involved. He was a witness in the most traumatic way possible.
But that fight, as horrific as it was, Namiko's struggle, it wasn't completely in vain, forensically speaking. The killer was wounded.
That's the critical part. That struggle left a trail. Police found significant amounts of blood that wasn't Namiko's. In the living room, yes, but also, importantly, in the bathroom, suggests the killer maybe tried to clean up, but didn't do a great job.
And near the entrance.
That's where they found the clearest evidence. A trail of blood drops and really distinct shoe prints, size 24 centimeter.
And the blood analysis came back quickly.
Very quickly. It was identified as Group B, definitely not Namiko's blood type. So right away, they had the killer's DNA profile, essentially.
And this lined up with what people saw.
It did. There were witness reports almost immediately. People saw a woman, they estimated her age then as maybe 40s or 50s, fleeing the area, and she looked injured, specifically holding her hand.
So they had a DNA profile, a shoe size, a description, and apparent injury. Seems like a lot to go on.
You'd think so, right? But the initial investigation, despite all that, it hit a dead end. The woman just vanished. The case went cold pretty fast. And this is where Satoru Takaba makes this decision that it defies everything you'd expect.
Yeah, the normal reaction is you get out, you can't live there anymore. The memories. Yeah. Especially with a young child, you'd want a fresh start, surely.
But Satoru did the opposite. I mean, he and Kohei moved out, of course, but he kept paying the rent on that apartment, that specific apartment where his wife was murdered.
He kept paying the rent.
Continuously. For 26 years. This wasn't like a symbolic gesture for a few months. This was a long-term, calculated decision.
Do you know how much that cost?
The sources confirm it was over 22 million yen. Just think about that. For more than 25 years, he's essentially funding 2 places. His new home with his son and the empty, preserved crime scene.
That's staggering. I mean, 22 million yen, that's roughly what, like 150,000 US dollars over that time, maybe more depending on exchange rates. Where did that money come from? Was he wealthy?
No, that's the thing. Sources emphasize he wasn't excessively wealthy. He was, a working person. This wasn't easy. It required incredible discipline, real sacrifice, money that could have gone to his son Kohei for education, for anything. It went to preserve that room.
So it wasn't about holding on to memories. It was practical.
Entirely practical. His stated goal was explicit: preserve the crime scene. He knew if someone else moved in, it'd be cleaned, painted, renovated, gone.
All the potential evidence the police might not have collected initially, the specific pattern of blood drops, the footprints in their exact location, maybe trace evidence?
Exactly. He understood, maybe intuitively, that forensic science changes. Technology gets better. He specifically said he wanted the site available, maybe for a reenactment if they ever made an arrest. He was basically acting as the evidence custodian.
Wow. So he's not just preserving the past, he's investing in the future possibility of justice.
And it was also a message, wasn't it? He said as much. He wanted the killer to know, maybe through media reports or just the fact the apartment stayed empty, we haven't forgotten, we will never give up, this isn't over.
He created a time capsule, funded out of his own pocket, a physical space where the crime was frozen, waiting. But keeping the scene intact wouldn't have mattered if the clock ran out legally, right?
Exactly. Preserving the physical evidence was just one monumental task. The other huge battle was against time itself, or rather, against the Japanese legal system at the time. But first, let's talk about the psychological pressure he kept up.
Right, because it wasn't just about paying rent quietly. He stayed visible. He was constantly in the media, handing out flyers, appealing for information, often with Kohei, his son, right there beside him.
Yeah, but notice how he appeared. He made a very deliberate choice, which he explained later, not to show extreme grief publicly. No crying, no breaking down on camera.
Why, that seems counterintuitive. You'd think showing the pain would garner sympathy, maybe encourage witnesses.
His logic was aimed directly at the killer. He believed, probably correctly, that the killer was watching the news reports, especially around the anniversaries. He refused to give them the satisfaction, the joy even, of seeing him broken by grief.
Wow. So he was actively trying to deny the killer any sense of victory.
Precisely. He chose to project strength, persistence, not devastation. He wanted the killer to feel the pressure of his continued existence, his continued fight, not the void left by Namiko. That must have taken unbelievable self-control.
I can't even imagine maintaining that public face for decades while dealing with the private reality. Did the sources give any hint about that internal struggle?
They mainly focus on the public strategy, emphasizing it was a conscious decision to channel everything into the pursuit. Every media appearance was a signal. I'm still here. This isn't forgotten. It was psychological warfare.
So he's preserving the physical evidence, maintaining the psychological pressure. But the legal clock was ticking down. The statute of limitations.
This was the massive existential threat looming over everything. Back in 1999, Japan had a statute of limitations for homicide. It was 25 years.
Meaning, if Namiko's killer wasn't caught and charged by November 13th, 2024.
They'd walk free, legally untouchable, forever. Regardless of the DNA evidence, regardless of Satoru's 22 million yen, the case would just expire.
That deadline must have been terrifying as the years passed.
Absolutely, and Satoru knew it. So he shifted some of his incredible energy. He realized pushing the police wasn't enough. They were doing what they could. He needed to change the law itself.
How does one person even begin to do that?
He wasn't entirely alone on this. He became a key part of a national movement. He joined forces, collaborated with families of other murder victims whose cases were also unsolved and nearing their expiration dates.
So it became a collective effort. A victims' advocacy group pushing for legislative change.
Exactly. It was a powerful coalition. They argued, very publicly and persistently, that for the most heinous crimes, like murder, there should be no time limit on justice. Especially, and this was key, with the rise of DNA technology.
Right, because the old argument for statutes of limitation that evidence degrades, memories fade DNA kind of challenged that, didn't it?
It fundamentally challenged it. Their point was, if the scientific evidence exists, potentially indefinitely, why should there be an arbitrary legal deadline? They framed it as a moral obligation of the state.
Was it a tough fight politically? Changing something as fundamental as a statute of limitations?
Incredibly tough. These laws exist for reasons: perceived fairness, preventing prosecutions based on shaky old evidence. But the emotional weight of the victims' stories, combined with the logic of DNA, started to shift public and political opinion.
And they succeeded.
They did. It was a landmark victory in 2010. The Japanese Diet, the parliament, passed a law abolishing the statute of limitations for murder and certain other very serious crimes.
Wow. And critically, this applied retroactively.
Yes, that was crucial. It applied to cases like Namiko's, where the statute hadn't yet expired. So in 2010, her case suddenly went from having 14 years left on the clock to having infinite time.
So Satoru's 26-year investment in preserving the crime scene suddenly had its legal foundation secured.
Absolutely. That legal change meant the DNA evidence he was paying to protect could wait. It could wait for the right technology, the right database, cross-referencing, the right moment. He bought time physically with the rent, and he bought time legally through his advocacy. It's an astonishing combination.
He literally kept the case alive, physically and legally. All that was needed now was the match.
Right, but even with the law changed, finding that match took another, 15 years? Almost. The case stayed stubbornly cold. And let's not forget the scale of the police effort initially.
Yeah, you mentioned the numbers earlier. 100,000 officers involved over time. Over 5,000 people interviewed.
Massive effort. They released composite sketches, offered a 3 million yen reward. Nothing worked for 25 years.
So what finally broke it open in 2024, leading into 2025? It wasn't a lucky break, you said.
No, it was systematic. It was about leveraging technology to re-examine the huge amount of data they already had. Think data mining, but applied to a cold case file.
So going back through those 5,000 names.
Exactly, but not randomly. They realized they needed a smarter filter. The technology in 1999 was good, but limited compared to now. Modern DNA analysis can get a profile from tiny, degraded samples that were useless back then.
And Satoru, preserving the scene, helped ensure the sample was still viable.
Right.
Absolutely. Keeping the apartment stable, preventing harsh cleaning or environmental damage. That was crucial for the DNA's longevity. It wasn't pristine, but it was apparently good enough for 2025 tech.
Okay, so the DNA was viable. How did they connect it to one person out of 5,000 after all this time? What was the filter?
They shifted their thinking about motive. Instead of just looking at neighbors or people near the crime scene, they started focusing on connections. Specifically, connections to the victim, Namiko, and this turned out to be the vital part.
Connections to Satoru, the husband.
Bingo. They hypothesized that the brutality, the killer bringing their own weapon. It might suggest a deep personal grudge, possibly directed at Satoru, with Namiko being the target because she was his wife.
That's a major strategic shift. Looking at the husband's entire social network, past and present.
Right, so they applied this filter to the database. Anyone with any known link to Satoru Takaba, that narrowed the list from 5,000 down to several hundred, according to the reports.
And in that smaller pool
emerged the name Kumiko Yasufuku, a 69-year-old woman working part-time. Her connection, not recent, it was from high school.
High school?
Yeah. She was Satoru's classmate. They were in the same soft tennis club together almost 50 years earlier. A name pulled from deep in the past, flagged by this new analytical approach.
Incredible. So once they had her name, things moved fast.
Relatively fast, yeah. Starting around August 2025, police began interviewing Yasufu multiple times. The data must have pointed strongly enough to make her a prime suspect.
And then came the crucial request.
The DNA sample. They needed her DNA to compare directly against the blood preserved in the apartment for 26 years.
And she refused.
Initially, yes. Which, while legally her right, it must have screamed guilt to the investigators. Why refuse if you have nothing to hide, especially when they have crime scene DNA?
That refusal probably just intensified the pressure.
You'd have to assume so. She held out for a few months under increasing scrutiny. Then the end came very quickly. October 30th, 2025, she finally caves, provides the DNA sample.
And the very next day.
The very next day, October 31st. Before the lab results were even officially announced, she walks into the Nagoya police station and turns herself in.
Wow. She knew it was over.
She must have known the match was inevitable. That evidence Satoru had paid to protect for 26 years was about to definitively link her to the crime. Later that same evening, police confirmed it. Her DNA matched the crime scene blood.
And her reaction when arrested?
Just 2 words, reportedly. That's correct. Zudesu. Just acceptance. The long wait was finally over.
Okay, so the who is solved. Kumiko Yasufuku. But the why? This is where the story takes another really disturbing turn, isn't it? Satoru's reaction was apparently one of total shock.
Complete shock. He remembered her, but faintly. He described her from his high school memory as Otanashi Onanoko, a quiet girl, maybe a bit reserved. not someone you'd ever associate with extreme violence.
The image just didn't fit the crime at all.
Not remotely, but the police now focus on her connection to Satoru, dug into that shared past, and the motive they uncovered. It goes all the way back to that high school soft tennis club, nearly 50 years ago.
50 years. What happened back then?
It's a story of unrequited love, basically. Satoru confirmed it himself. Back in high school, Yasufuku clearly had strong feelings for him. She sent him letters. She gave him chocolates on Valentine's Day, which, in Japan, especially back then, giving chocolates from a girl to a boy on Valentine's Day is a pretty clear signal.
A declaration of interest. And Satoru?
He confirmed he had rejected her advances back then. Politely, it seems, but clearly. He told her he liked someone else at the time.
Okay, so a high school crush that didn't work out. That happens all the time. How does that possibly escalate into murder decades later?
No clear.
Disproportionate. Trivial almost.
Well, trivial to an outsider, maybe. But we have to be careful not to minimize the potential psychological impact. For someone perhaps predisposed to obsession or someone whose self-worth became deeply entangled with that rejection, it might not have been trivial to her. It could have festered, been the defining moment of perceived failure.
So resentment she carried for decades, silently.
Possibly suppressed, yeah. Not necessarily conscious every day, but maybe a root of bitterness or unresolved feeling. But it needed a spark, right? Something to reignite it after all that time.
What was the spark?
They apparently had almost no contact for decades after high school. The key event seems to have been a high school club reunion. An obi-kai, they call it. It happened about a year before the murder, so around 1998.
They saw each other there.
Yeah.
After all those years.
Yes. And during that reunion, Satoru apparently made a very casual remark to her, something completely innocuous on the surface.
What did he say?
Just something like, I heard you got married and are doing well. Or perhaps more likely, he simply mentioned his life, that he was married, had a family, was happy.
Oh.
And the analysis, the police theory, is that this casual comment, this confirmation of his happy, settled life without her, acted as a kind of final devastating rejection.
It destroyed any lingering fantasies she might have held on to.
That seems to be the idea. For decades, maybe there was some tiny irrational corner of her mind where hope lingered. Seeing him, hearing he was happily married, it slammed the door shut. It wasn't just a past rejection. It was confirmation that his life was full and she was a part of it.
And Namiko, his wife, became the target.
Exactly. Namiko, who Yasufuku apparently didn't know personally, had never even met. She became the symbol, the living embodiment of the happiness and life Satoru had that Yasufuku felt she was denied.
So the violence wasn't about Namiko at all. It was projected onto her.
That's the interpretation. It explains the premeditation bringing the knife. It explains attacking Namiko, the representative of Satoru's fulfillment, rather than confronting Satoru directly. It was symbolic annihilation.
I still find it hard to grasp, though. 50 years. Are we sure there wasn't something else? Some more recent conflict? A financial issue, maybe? Anything?
It's a valid question. But based on the available reports and police statements, the focus is overwhelmingly on this long, simmering resentment ignited by that reunion. They confirm the high school details, the crush, the rejection. This specific pathology, where obsession turns a symbol into a target, seems to be the most consistent explanation offered for why Namiko specifically was killed in such a brutal way. It's that internal twisted logic of obsession.
And it fits with Satoru saying none of his knives were missing. Yasufuku came prepared to destroy this symbol of his happiness. Namiko paid the price for a 50-year-old high school rejection. It's chilling.
Yeah. And so the arrest brings us to the end of these two parallel, incredibly long burdens. On one side, you have Satoru. His burden was public, active, 26 years fighting to keep the memory alive, fighting the legal clock, pouring his finances into preserving that room.
His son Kohei is nearly 30 now. He summed it up powerfully, didn't he? He said the arrest was purely down to his father's shunin. That sheer persistence, that tenacity.
Yeah, shunin captures it perfectly. And for Satoru, the relief when the arrest finally happened was palpable. He simply said, I'm done. He felt he could finally face his wife, that she could forgive him for how long it took. That sense of a duty fulfilled.
An immense weight lifted. But then there's the other side. Kumiko Yasufuku's burden. Hidden, silent, but maybe just as heavy in its own way.
Absolutely. 26 years lived with the constant gnawing fear that the evidence was still out there, that the DNA she left behind was a ticking time bomb.
She admitted as much to the police. Sure.
She did. She confessed she was anxious every day, said she couldn't even bring herself to read news articles about the case over the years, tried to push it down.
But it came back.
Cyclically, it seems. She revealed that every year, as the anniversary November 13th approached, she'd become deeply troubled, depressed, and sinking. That annual descent into anxiety was the hidden price she paid.
And her reason for finally surrendering. It wasn't purely about remorse, was it?
Apparently not, or at least not primarily. Her stated motivation was more practical. She said she didn't want to cause trouble for her family, and crucially, she didn't want to be caught by police. It suggests the final trigger was the intensified investigation, the DNA request. She knew the game was up.
The regret for the victim only came after she accepted the inevitable.
That seems to be the timeline. The surrender was driven by pragmatism, by the closing net. The remorse followed the realization she was caught.
So the arrest closes the chapter for both of them in very different ways. And for Kohei, the son.
For Kohei, who has no conscious memory of his mother or the event itself, aside from what he knows from her diary, he expressed hope that now, perhaps during the trial, more details about the why might emerge. Understanding the motive seems to be the final piece for the family's sense of closure.
It's just an incredible story. Proof that evidence, if you can protect it, really doesn't expire. And the lengths one person will go to. Hashtag outro.
Yeah, if you boil it down, this arrest happened because two almost impossible things aligned perfectly, didn't they? You had the human factor. Satoru's unbelievable decades-long dedication, paying the rent, pushing for the law change, just sheer will.
And then you had the science factor. Modern forensic tech, data mining, advanced DNA analysis, finally being able to make sense of that evidence he protected. One couldn't have worked without the other.
It really underscores the importance of abolishing that statute of limitations, too. It sends a clear message. Time doesn't erase guilt, especially when science can bridge the gap. Satoru's fight helped make that a reality for potentially many other cold cases in Japan.
But the final twist, the really unsettling part, goes back to the motive, doesn't it? The person who inflicted this unimaginable, life-altering suffering on Satoru Takaba wasn't some random monster.
No, it was someone from his distant past, someone who at one point apparently felt love, or at least intense affection for him. And that feeling, twisted by rejection and time, morphed into this horrific symbolic violence against his family.
It leaves you with a really difficult question, I think. When does true closure actually arrive for Satoru and Kohei? Was it the moment Yasufuku was identified? The moment the science provided the answer?
Or is the final, maybe hardest part of closure accepting the why? Having to fully confront the reality that this entire tragedy, the loss of Namiko, the 26 years of struggle, it all stemmed from something as seemingly distant and contained as a high school rejection, magnified by decades of dark obsession. Understanding that human element, that deep, disturbing root, that might be the most painful truth they have to process now.